I'm Chris Fox, and this is the Bourbonite. This channel, for the most part, is about bourbon. I mean, it's part of the namesake. Bourbon and American whiskeys. But this week on Thursday, we celebrated the international. It was Scotch Day. So let's talk Scotch, since it is still whiskey and it's quite good as well. So Scotch, to put it as simply as possible, is whiskey from Scotland. But like bourbon is American, Scotch has much more to it than just being a brown spirit from Scotland. The first and kind of the mixed bag difference is that when we're talking about Scotch whiskey, there's no E. When you're talking about bourbon whiskey, there's usually an E. Part of this is a regional thing, European versus American. But there are different distilleries in the States that don't use the E, just to pay homage to the tradition of Scotch and things like that. This is like the European version of color having a U instead of the American version, which doesn't, or using the word realize but spelling it with an S instead of a Z. It's just a kind of a language and cultural difference between the two regions. But again, there are people here in the States that use that S, and I don't know, but I would assume there's some folks in Europe that use the Z, but maybe not. So, much like bourbon, Scotch has some legal definitions to make it Scotch specifically. First of all, it has to be produced in a distillery in Scotland, makes sense with the whole regional thing, and it has to be made from water and malted barley. During the distilling process, they can only add whole grains of the cereals, and they have to be processed at that distillery. During the distilling process, it has to be converted to a fermentable substrate using only endogenous enzyme systems. So that means it uses enzymes that are produced by only the malt itself. Whereas when you're talking bourbon, sometimes bourbon distillers will actually inject certain enzymes into the process to get certain flavors or bring out certain flavors. Along this long fermentation process, the Scotch can only be fermented using yeast. And all of that only has to do with the cereals or the grains. Now, it also has to be distilled at less than 94.8% alcohol. So then, it has to be matured in an excise facility in Scotland for no less than 3 years in a cask sizing no more than 700 liters. To that end, distillers can't add anything more than spirit, caramel, and water to the finished product. To that end, they want to make sure that the Scotch retains the color, the aroma, and the taste of the raw materials that were used in the making process. So another big element that is pretty prominent throughout a lot of Scotches, but not all, is the addition of peat, which is something that you really don't get when you're talking bourbons. The peat is actually a soily, like vegetable decomposition material that they use in the smoking and drying process of the grains and the cereals that they put into the mash. So when certain distilleries utilize peat in their smoking and drying process, it actually adds a smoky flavor to the Scotch when everything's all said and done. Like I said before, this stuff is influenced heavily by the region that it comes from, Scotland. But to that end, similar to how bourbons are heavily influenced and very much proudly don the labels of the states that they come from, Scotch is very prominent in the areas that it's distilled in. You have several different regions within Scotland that have different variations on Scotch. They're all Scotch, but they're all very, very different. So let's take a quick Scotch tour of Scotland. Starting from the north, the regions include the islands of Orkney. Now, You'll have to forgive my pronunciation of any of these. I am very much a single language American, and my pronunciations are going to be terrible. I promise you that. Continuing south, we have the Highland region. Then there's the Speyside region. Then the Lowlands. Then the Campbelltown region. Then the Islay region. Islay? I'm not Scottish. Now, there's a lot more to Scotch. In fact, there's several channels that are dedicated to just this delicious whiskey. But this is the Bourbon Night, so we'll celebrate National Scotch Day or International Scotch Day or whatever it is, and then we'll get back to our normal corn mash bills. If you want to dig a little bit deeper into the world of Scotch, I'll connect to a few channels that I'm a fan of, that you can see what it's all about, but we'll probably stick to bourbon. So if you like what you've seen, hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and stay tuned because there's plenty more bourbon adventures to be had. Fermentable substrate during, fermentable substrate only by, it has to be converted to a fermentable substrate. Fermentable substrate using only endogenous enzyme systems. Converted to fermentable substrate. Son of a bitch. Okay. Endogenous enzyme systems. Yeah.